I lived in a community where there was about 30 boys that went into the service. My brother Bill, he wanted to go in so bad. He was in the Air Force, along with my other two brothers. They were in the Air Force also. They were all three pilots. He went over to the South Pacific. On the mission that he went on, he got shot down. On Christmas Eve, we got the message that Bill was killed. It's a beautiful thing to know, even though in the midst of sadness and despair, that your loved ones perished so that we might have the freedoms we have. I would like to express my thanks to all the people, all the men and women that have served our country and have perished so that we might have the freedoms that we have today.
Hey, this is Pastor Steve, and we are coming back. I'm so excited to be able to announce to you that May the 31st, we will be opening our doors for the 9 and 11 a.m. services here at Bethel. And you're going to get an opportunity to sit right here in the auditorium, the worship auditorium, and worship God and stand and engage. And, you know, of course, things will look a little bit different, and we're going to put things in place, guidelines that we're going to go by, and we, certainly may be asking you to, adjust to some of the changes, but it's going to be great. It's going to be fantastic. We're going to come and we're going to celebrate together and honor the Lord, and just, and no better day. May the 31st is Pentecost Sunday, the day the church was launched and went out, and evangelism, and just a powerful experience there in Acts chapter 2. So we're going to get a chance to celebrate that, celebrate coming back together. It's just going to be a great day. And hey, we certainly understand if you're still a little bit apprehensive and uncomfortable. Hey, we've still got online, and you can tune in to Facebook Live or to YouTube. So, hey, however it works for you, but we're going to open our doors and we're going to give God the glory. And so come out and join us. And I'm going to be bringing a word that day, and be bringing the message. So just excited about that opportunity. Look forward to seeing you sitting right here in the auditorium and worshiping God on May the 31st. We're excited. God bless you.
Good morning, Bethel. Thanks for tuning in. Please worship with us.
Miracles when you move, such an easy thing for you to do. Your hand is moving right now. You are still showing up at the tomb of every Lazarus.
here, moving in our midst. I worship you. Oh, I worship you. You are here. You're working in this place. I worship you, Lord. I worship you. Come on, you sing it, Waymaker. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, and waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Say that is who you are. 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 Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, waymaker, miracle worker, promise keep, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 'Cause you never lost a battle. You never will, no.
You keep doing again. You keep doing again.
Come on, just take a moment and worship Him right there where you are. We love you, Jesus. Come on, open your mouth and just bless Him right now. We bless your name, God. You're still making ways.
You do it again.
Hey, good morning, Bethel Church. So glad that you've tuned in this morning. That's one of my favorite songs, and I want to bring your attention to what that song is about, and that's God's commitment to make a way. And it's oftentimes a part of our faith that we forget about. We get so caught up in the problems that we're experiencing, and we want to be honest, and we want to be real, and we want to be transparent. But the truth about the problems that we're facing in this life and in the life to come is that God has made a commitment to us that He has made a way. And even though we might not understand His ways sometimes, because the Bible teaches us that God's ways are higher than ours, we trust that He is making a way. And that even if we're in the middle of a dry season, a doubting season, or we're in the middle of a waiting season, we're remaining faithful in all of those seasons. That God has promised to make a way. In Ecclesiastes in 3, it was the passage that we talked about at the very beginning of this series, that there's a season for everything. There's a time and a place for every matter under heaven. There is a season to go through the wilderness, but there is also a season where a way is made to bring us out of the wilderness. See, there's a time to be born, and there is a time to die. There's a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted. There is a time to kill, but there's also a time to heal. We're not always in the humdrum and the negative seasons of life. There are good seasons. And I want to encourage you this morning that in the good seasons, act your season. It's not time to be somber and melancholic. It's time to rejoice and to celebrate. You see, there's a time to break down, and there is a time to also build up. There's a time to cry, but there's also a time to laugh. There is a time to mourn, and there is a time to dance. And this morning, I want to talk to you about that last phrase, a time to dance. You see, life can be tough sometimes, and there are seasons that are just rough on us. But in all those seasons, remembering that faithfulness is the key, moving forward and knowing that soon your dancing season is going to come. What I've noticed in our culture is that used to when I was younger, I remember it just wasn't okay to not be okay. You didn't really share your dirt with people. When you were struggling emotionally and people say, hey, how you doing? Usually you said something like, oh, I'm blessed and highly favored, or I'm saved and sanctified and I'm on my way to heaven. In other words, you had to try to find something positive to say even when you felt awful. But now I feel like the script is kind of turned, and unless you're constantly saying you're struggling or you're going through a battle, it's almost like you get accused of not being real. It's almost like no one expects us to go through a joyous season, a season of dancing. In fact, sometimes when you are over exuberant about the season of life you're in, sometimes you've seen it before, you get an eye roll. You get this, oh, you must be fake or phony. You must be really hiding something. It's almost like we don't expect Christians to have joy anymore. We're afraid we're going to hurt somebody else's feelings, or we're going to embarrass ourselves or the church, or we're going to run off the unsaved because we do a little bit of dancing and shouting and extravagant worship when we get the realization of how good God has been to us. It's almost like we're going to offend someone who doesn't believe like I believe. Keeping it real has been translated into this: only being transparent when things are tough. But life isn't always tough. There is a dancing season. And this morning, I want you to remember that when it's time to dance, dance. It's not time to sit around and mope and groan, but contend for the joy of your salvation. Last week, we talked about that we know we've got the spirit of joy inside of us, but sometimes we just don't have the joy of the Spirit. But there's like this old song that we used to sing, and it's my favorite. And it says something to the tune of, when I think about Jesus and what He's done for me, when I think about Jesus and how He set me free, I can dance, 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 dance all night. And even in the middle of a doubting season, a waiting season, a trial season, there are going to be little just points where you get out of the situation you're in and you really begin to think about what Jesus has done for you. And when you are in the middle of that little season, I want to challenge you to dance like nobody's watching. You see, while the Christian life isn't void of sorrows, crying, war, loss, dryness, and doubt, and it's so important for us to suffer well, it is equally important for us to remember that there is a season of harvest. There are seasons of peace. There are seasons of laughing and plenty, and seasons of faith and seasons of dancing. And during those seasons, our worship is celebratory. And during a season of dancing, the way you act your season is to do just that. You dance. You don't hide your excitement. You don't cover up your joy. And the reason I feel like this is so important for us to remember is because many people don't stray from the faith during the hard seasons. We stray from the faith during the good seasons. During the hard seasons, we're crying out to God and we're saying, God, I need you. But during the good seasons, we forget to dance. We forget to celebrate His goodness because we don't have the realization in the moment of how much we really need Him, how He literally puts the breath in our lungs, how He literally puts one foot in front of the other, how He could pull His hand back at any time. So during the dancing seasons, act your season and dance and worship and celebrate God. David exclaimed in the book of Psalms, remember he had some sad Psalms, but he had just as many hype Psalms as well. In chapter 30, verses 11 through 12, he said, you have turned my mourning into dancing. You've loosed my sackcloth. In other words, you've taken off my mourning clothes and you've given me a brand new outfit, one that shows how happy I am, that my glory may sing your praise and not be silent. Oh Lord my God, I will give thanks to you forever. You see, the same God that is there in the hard times is the same God that can deliver you from your hard time and turn your mourning into dancing. And today, I am contending for the promise of joy in the life of the believer. And I'm also contending that during those moments of joy, we don't push them to the side, but we celebrate them, because you don't know when you're going to go back into a dry season, into a season of trials and tribulations. So you better dance when you hear the music. You better dance when you can, because sometimes the dancing seasons can be short. Don't forget that He is the God that caused a 99-year-old man and 90-year-old woman to conceive a child. The one that pulled back the Red Sea to save the Israelites from their Egyptian oppressors. The one who caused blind men to see and lame men to walk. Who resurrected multiple people. Who resurrected His Son, who was seen by hundreds of people. And that He has had a plan all along for us to be Him. That's the God that we serve. So that it's always a good time to dance. But when you think about Jesus and you think about what He's done for you, I want to contend for the joy of the Lord. I want to contend. I want us to bring dancing back. I want us to bring back celebration and worship, extravagant worship that has been the pattern from the Old Testament into the New Testament. I want you to turn with me in 2 Samuel chapter 6, verses 12 through 23. And in verse 12, it reads like this, "And it was told to King David that the Lord had blessed the household of Obed-Edom and all that belongs to him because of the ark of God." The ark of God was where God's presence resided. And David had tried to bring the ark into the temple, but someone touched it, and that was a clear, defiant act against God's commandments. And so, and it killed the man who touched it. And so rather than bringing it, there was a lot of fear. They just put it in another man's house. And because the presence of God was in Obed-Edom's house, Obed-Edom was really blessed, and David heard about it. So he's like, you know what? Forget this. We're going to do this the right way. We're going to handle the presence of God like He prescribed. And as long as we handle God's presence like He told us, we'll be safe. So they began to bring the Ark of the Covenant in, and David went and brought up the Ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David, but he did it with rejoicing. You see, the tone was set. This was not a time of weeping. And for those of you who are in a mourning season, you're in a weeping season. I am not trying to expedite it or move you out of it before your time. But you do need to know this, that your mourning will be turned into dancing. This was not a time for David to stay silent or sit back and cry. The presence of God was back, and it was not a time for David to take the credit for himself. It was a time of great rejoicing. In verse 13 it says, "And when those who bore the ark of the Lord had gone 6 steps, he sacrificed an ox and a fattened animal." The entire procession is filled with great worship to God. They're offering everything they have in worship and in celebration that the presence of God is among them. In verse 14 it says, "And then David danced before the Lord with all his might, and David was wearing a linen ephod." I often look at this verse and I think to myself, what does it look like to dance before the Lord with all of his might? I imagine that maybe David wasn't really in rhythm with the music. Maybe he was. But I don't think that a particular style of dancing was David's aim here. I think his aim was, God, you've given me everything, so who am I to hold back these hands and these legs and these feet? God, you've everything on this earth you have created. And on top of all that, on top of the gift of life, on top of choosing me to be the king of Israel, on top of choosing Israel to be your people, you're not just doing that, but you're allowing your presence to come in and dwell in this place. And because of it, David was excited and he began to dance before the Lord with all of his might. Unfortunately, worship like this has been comically attributed by certain theologians to those of us who claim to be Pentecostal. The truth is this, honestly though, is that if you're not Pentecostal, you're not part of the church. We're going to be celebrating Pentecost this coming Sunday, a week from today, on May the 31st. And Pastor Steve's going to be bringing a message on Pentecost. And Pentecost, even though it has been labeled a denomination and a way certain people feel about the Holy Spirit, Pentecost is what started the church. So the truth is this also, is that extravagant worship, dancing, even yelling and shouting, lifting of hands, sacrificially giving has always been a natural response of God's people to His manifest presence settling in among them. So David is really setting a pattern, yes, even for us today in 2020. That when we think about Jesus and what He's done for us, when we think about Jesus and how He set me free, we should be okay with an outward expression of our worship. Now, in a minute, we're going to talk about why this linen gown thing that David was wearing is significant, but just remember that. So then in verse 15, it says, so David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouting and with the sound of the horn. And I want you to notice this is that because David is worshiping extravagantly, those around him begin to follow his lead. Verse 16, and as the ark of the Lord came into the city of David, we're just going to call her Michelle. That's not how you pronounce her name. You can go to blueletterbible.com, find the name, click on it. They'll tell you how to pronounce it. But we're going to call her Michelle, just for the sake of being able to speak very clear. But Michelle, the daughter of Saul, looked out of the window and saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord. And this next phrase, it's grieving, but it's also just very enlightening that she despised him in her heart. You have to stop and ask yourself the question, what was going on in Michelle's heart? When she saw her husband dancing before the Lord, that caused her to actually despise him in her heart. It's clear the scripture was telling us she knew it was before the Lord. So the issue was not with what David was doing, but what was going on in her heart. And I want to just share this with you. When you find yourself, because we're going to be back in the worship gathering, and people are going to be excited. The gathering of the believers is a part of who the church. Yes, the church is the believers, but part of being a church is fellowshipping together. And yes, God, He meets us in a different way in those moments. And some people are going to be excited, and some people might dance and shout and yell. And I want to just challenge you is don't be a Michelle. If you're not free or even comfortable enough to dance, or maybe that's just not the way you worship, I want to challenge you is that when you feel a heart of cynicism rising up inside of you, and you find yourself despising those that are worshiping extravagantly, to put the brakes on and ask an honest question. Ask yourself the question, what's going on in your heart? We're going to talk more about that in just a minute. But in verse 17, and they brought in the ark of the Lord, and they set it in its place inside the tent that David had pitched for. He had made a special spot for the presence of God. He had made preparation for God's presence. And then David offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. And when David had finished the burnt offering and the peace offering, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord of hosts and distributed among all the people. He gave them a bunch of snacks. And then they all left and they went to their house. And then here's really where the meat of the story culminates in verse 20. And David returned to his own house to bless it. And guess who was waiting for him? Saul's daughter, Michelle. She came out to meet David, and she said this, how the king of Israel honored himself today. Do you hear the sarcasm? Uncovering himself today before the eyes of his servants, female servants, as one of those vulgar fellows shamelessly uncovers himself. We see the answer to the question that I posed earlier. What was going on in her heart when she says, as one of the vulgar fellows that shamelessly uncovers himself? You see, there was actually nothing inappropriate about what David was wearing, but what David was wearing, and this is the problem that Michelle had with David, is that he had removed his royal robes and was wearing clothes just like a common person. You see, David had stripped himself of his position, of his prominence, and his public opinion, and he had intentionally humbled himself before the Lord. And I want to say that maybe that was the reason why Michelle just couldn't go down there and dance with her husband before the Lord, because she was not willing to be among the common people. She was not willing to humble herself so that she could be exalted, and instead she exalts herself. And you're going to see at the very end of this passage where she is humbled because of that. But what kept her from dancing? She held what others around her thought of her in higher regard than the Lord. She was more caught up on if she looked dumb or not. And you'll see in a little bit, she's blasting David. And David says, I know I look dumb. That's exactly why I did it. I was humbling myself before the Lord. This was not an act of great spirituality. This was flowing out of the humility of my heart, that when I think about how He has delivered our country, when I think about how He has delivered me from all kinds of mess, from battle, and when I begin to sense that the presence of God is here among us again, what else can I do but throw off my royal robes, throw off my position and my prominence and my popularity, and just worship before the Lord with all of my might? It was a dancing season. And so David danced. Why was he able to do that? Because he didn't need king's clothes. And this is one of the things I love about David, is that he was always just willing to dismiss himself of the prominence and the pomp and just the stick up your nose arrogance of royalty. He, think back to when he killed Goliath. He's like, I saw that, your stuff doesn't even fit me. Let me just use this little rinky-dink sling. You know what? I don't need all this opulence. I can worship God just like everybody else does. And what a great example for a leader to set. And in verse 21, and David said to Michelle, it was before the Lord who chose me. And this, I think David's getting in his flesh here a little bit. But he said, it was before the Lord who chose me above your father and above everybody in his house to appoint me as a prince over Israel, the people of the Lord. And then he comes back and he says, and I'm going to celebrate before the Lord. And then my favorite part of this whole story, he says, and I will make myself yet more contemptible than this, and I will be abased in your eyes. In other words, he says, you think that you've seen me humiliate myself? Oh, you haven't seen anything yet. Just you wait. I will make myself more contemptible than this, because it was before the Lord. It wasn't for you. My worship was not for you. So honestly, Michelle, I don't really care what your opinion is of it. In fact, this is just a taste of what it's like when the presence of God is among us. And I'm going to do this more often. And unless your heart changes, Michelle, I'm going to be more humiliated in your eyes as time moves on. You see, David readily agrees with his wife. Yes, I realize that I have humiliated myself, and I plan on continuing to do just that. When it's time to dance, dance. That's how you act your season. But pride will keep us from dancing. Pride will keep us from worshiping God with everything we have. Pride is the enemy of worship. And for those of you who maybe you are an extravagant worshiper, I want to let you know it's not a sign of your spirituality or your maturity, but instead it's an act of humility. And then David goes on and he says that I'm going to be honored because of this. And then the Bible has this very unusual ending. And it says, the daughter of Saul had no child to the day of her death. And it doesn't say she was barren because of her disposition to worship, but there does seem to be some kind of connection there, lest it wouldn't have brought it up. It seems like there's a purpose in mentioning that barrenness, lack of fruit, is held in close association towards this kind of attitude towards extravagance and worship to God. Now, I don't think that comes over as physical barrenness to us today, but I think there's a lot of symbolism here, and to see that I think many times we don't reap the fruits that we could reap because of the pride that comes up in our lives. So this morning I want to challenge you during your dancing season to act your season. When it's time to dance, just dance. But what will people think of me? Well, some won't notice because they'll be dancing too. And then some will start dancing because you dance. And then there will be others who sit back and despise you because of the hardness in their own heart. But dance anyways. Celebrate the victories and the wins and the times that God made a way just as hard as you mourned when you needed Him to step in. You see, the purpose here is to not get you to dance. That's what you've been talking about the whole time. No, it's like all actions, like all things that we do and decisions we make and words we speak and everything that comes out of us flows from somewhere, and it flows from our heart. The question we must ask ourselves and then have the boldness to honestly hear and answer is this: if I do dance, why do I dance? Do I dance to prove my spirituality? Do I worship extravagantly to be seen? Do I sing 12 decibels louder than everybody else so that I can be heard? Or is it really truly flowing from a heart of humility? Because we see in the New Testament where Jesus came and He didn't just call out people's actions, He called out their motives behind them. So even when we're doing the right thing, even when we're dancing in the dancing season, we need to just stop and ask ourselves, why? Why? Is this really an act of worship to the Lord, or is this to bring attention to myself? And we see further down in the New Testament, in the epistles, that there is some order to this type of extravagant worship, that we're to do it at the right time and in decency, doing what the Holy Spirit did and putting the limelight on Jesus and not on ourselves. But I want to ask those of you who can't dance. And like I said, I'm not just talking about literal dance. I'm talking about when we have a hard time worshiping God outwardly. Just maybe we can stop in the moment in the presence of God and say, God, why? Why can't I lift my hands in worship like the Word talks about, without wrath and judgment? And this is not meant to shame you or make you do something to prove to the rest of us that you really love the Lord. But ask yourself these questions. Is pride in the way? Is my pride keeping me from outwardly worshiping? Is bitterness standing in the way? You see, this is more about your heart than it is your feet. And so whenever we can't give God our mouths and our hands, our feet, our money, our service, there's generally something like Michelle going on in the heart. And so if you're a believer, you're following Jesus and you can't dance. You can't worship outwardly. I want to challenge you this morning to just ask yourself that question. Why is it? Am I so bound up with traditions of men? Am I so bound up in showing my spirituality through being somber that I just can't let my hair down every once in a while and just give Him the all-out worship He deserves? There's some of you who maybe, like Michelle, there's something deeper in your heart. Maybe the reason you can't dance is because of the grip that sin has on your heart. It's never been loosed on your life. And I don't know where Michelle was in belief to God, but we know that David was sensing the presence of God, and something was, and she evidently was not there. Maybe the thought of any type of worship in general to a God that I cannot see appalls you, because in reality, you've lived your life worshiping yourself, your life, and your family. And right now, I really believe that for some of us, for some of you who aren't saved, that the Holy Spirit is doing a saving work in you right now as I speak. He's pulling back the scales of your eyes. And so many times, dancing doesn't save you. And these secondary things don't save us. But many times when we look at the way they manifest ourselves in our lives, it shows us the upstream issue. And just like the realization of God's presence sent David into an act of humility and worship, the realization that you have deep-seated heart issues is bringing about to you right now that you need the presence of God in your life. But because of your sin, like Michelle, there's something in the way and you need life change. I want to ask you to pray this prayer with me right now. God, I'm so sorry that I've tried to live my life with you and void of your presence. I don't want to be separated from you. I give you permission to come in and just clean out anything that needs to be cleaned out. Save me from my sins. I accept what Jesus did. I accept that He came back to life for me, and I want to be saved. If you prayed that prayer, I believe that God is doing something inside of you even before that. But I want you to message in the comments, or you can even send us an email to info@bethelchurch.info. We're going to get some information in your hands. I just found out that a 12-year-old young man gave his life to the Lord just this past Sunday, and he's already been reaching out to our family pastor, and they're already beginning the process of discipleship, of course, along with his parents. And it's awesome to hear news of life change right here in the middle of this pandemic that we've been in. Hey, but look, you need to be looking forward to something here 1 week from today. Next Sunday, May 31st, we are going to be gathering together in worship. It is going to be a little bit different. Please check your email, look online. If you're not comfortable coming, no one's judging you or thinking you're less spiritual. You can continue to engage online, and there'll be people there commenting and engaging with you. We are looking forward to seeing everybody in person. The seating arrangement will be a little bit different, so just come maybe a few minutes early, and just be real flexible. We're really trying to get us back fellowshipping and worshiping together and keeping people safe. So we're looking forward to seeing you this coming Sunday, May 31st, Pentecost Sunday at 9 a.m. and at 11 a.m. Church, stay safe this week, and we will see you this coming Sunday.